told by Chris Mays is, to put it diplomatically, not true. What she described as 5 cases is really 3 cases. 2 of the names she gave were adult children of Dolores Sweet. And of the 3 cases, now remember, she had said that the cases were not flagged in the Department of Education. 2 of those 3 cases were. We were the ones who brought them to her attention, or to the attention of the Assistant Attorney General involved. The one case that was not, wasn't a result of heroic action by the Attorney General's office. It was discovered by a credit union, and they happened to go to her rather than to us. But aside from the case that was discovered by the credit union, all of these cases came to her from us. In addition to that, we've sent her another 7 cases for investigation of fraud. One person had 5 students, 3 of them with fraudulent birth certificates that we discovered. One of them with 4 students, 3 of them with fraudulent birth certificates that we discovered, and 1 case of a fraudulent teaching certificate which we discovered. When we discovered that, we sent it directly to the Attorney General's office. When I was the Attorney General, I always gave credit to people who deserve credit. Her philosophy is the opposite. Not only does she not give credit, but she is not truthful about saying that we didn't flag them, when in fact, with the sole exception of the case that was discovered by a credit union, we've sent her all of the fraud cases that she has. When I took office, I was determined to root out fraud under my predecessor and misuse of funds under my predecessor. I hired an auditor, John Ward, who's now the director of the program, who has, how many years were you in the Auditor General's office?
17.
17. John was an auditor in the Auditor General's office for 17 years. I hired him. It's the first time an auditor had been hired for that purpose in the Department of Education. And he was there to make sure that all expenditures were proper, lawful, for valid educational purposes, and to root out any fraud that occurred. And as I mentioned, we sent her 2 of the 3 cases she talked about. We sent her another 7 cases that she didn't talk about, and the one additional case was discovered by a credit union, not by the Attorney General. The 3 employees involved were hired by my Democrat predecessor and were fired by me. As a former Attorney General, I have no tolerance for fraudulent activity or for misspending of funds. And as I mentioned, I've cracked down on, I think, what I just believe to be a lax attitude of my predecessor. And as a result of my cracking down, for a number, some of you covered this, a number of state board meetings, when they had a call to the public, 40 or 50 people would come up and take turns attacking me for cracking down. They wanted the old lax system. They didn't like the fact that I was making sure that every expenditure was for a valid educational purpose and was in compliance with the law. And so I think you've been given a very false picture. I'm happy to take any questions, or perhaps John will handle some if they're detailed.
When did you first discover those 2 cases that you said you brought to her attention?
John, do you want to?
We brought those to the Attorney General's.
Come to the microphone.
Pardon me. The 2 employees that we discovered, we brought to the Attorney General's office, I believe, in early December, this past December, 2023.
How do you guys discover that? Or what was the first red flag that made you guys aware of fraud?
As we were assembling documentation that the Attorney General's office had requested regarding Dolores Sweet, we just started to take a holistic look at some of the other employees within our program, and we started to realize there were some anomalies with these 2 employees, and then we turned that information over to the Attorney General's office.
So it'd be fair to say you may not have discovered those cases had the sweet case from the credit union not come up first.
So we are always in the process of improving internal control within the ESA program, and so I believe that ultimately we would have found these cases.
Mays today also mentioned what she said, that this program appears to be prime and rife with fraud. What is your response to those comments?
We have, when there are bad actors in the program, we are putting in place all of the internal controls to find them, and as you can see, it's working. And so to say that it's ripe with fraud, I would take issue with that assessment.
Yeah, let me just also add, you know, unfortunately, all government agencies do everything they can to prevent fraud, but the ESA program is not the first time there has been any fraud. I urge you to look at the Auditor General's website, and you will find a number of cases much bigger than what we're talking about here, in not only a number of government agencies, but a number of school districts. So to attack the ESA program as though that's the only place any fraud ever occurred is inaccurate. Actually, you'll find a lot more has occurred in the public schools, and we do everything we can to prevent it in the public schools as well, obviously. But I think Chris Mays has got a skewed view.
But given the fact that you just said you discovered, what, 7 in addition to the 2?
Yes, that was by checking birth certificates. We
Yeah.
started checking birth certificates.
So given that, within a year roughly, you've discovered 9 cases, do you agree with the Attorney General that the legislature needs to do more to put guardrails on this program to prevent?
No, the guardrails are there now.
Can I ask John some questions? How many people do you have looking at birth certificates and going through all of these expenses? I mean, you guys have, what, hundreds of new students coming in every week to the ESA program, right? How many people do you have going through all of this, and what is the process in looking at birth certificates?
So our entire enrollment team is trained to review birth certificates. And as I mentioned just a minute ago, we're always in a continuous process of improvement. And so we are putting in place other things to continue to take a deeper look at birth certificates, but an entire team of enrollment specialists look at every single birth certificate that comes through. So we have, I believe, 8 enrollment specialists today who are looking at that.
Is that enough for how many students are enrolling each week?
We're able to keep, so we have 30 days to review every application that comes into the ESA program, and we always meet that requirement.
I think Mays mentions like understaffing. What do you make of that characterization? Is the office fully staffed, like the ESA program administrators? Or?
So we're in the process of hiring, like most places are, to fully staff ourselves. We're bringing on employees as we speak.
What are the numbers, John?
So currently in the purchase review area, I believe we have 12 employees, and we will be increasing that by another 7 or 8 employees.
But give her the total for your department.
Yeah, so for the entire department, we currently have about 30 employees. We're looking to get around 42 employees.
Which we appropriated by the legislature for 42. We're at 30, and we're trying to fill the slots. We sometimes lose people to other agencies of government because they let people work from home, and we don't do that.
So you feel like there are enough guardrails for ESA, the ESA program right now?
Yes, I went to great lengths. I hired a full-time auditor with 19 years with the Auditor General's office, and we've been not only carefully looking to discover fraud, but putting procedures in place. For example, we found that some of these employees that were committing fraud were asking for specific requests for people that they wanted to help. We've changed to make that random, so nobody can request something that they're checking. So we've put procedures in place to be sure that no fraud occurs.
Another piece of this was the disability diagnoses. I believe like, some of them were falsified to obtain more money. And so what does the department do to assess whether, like diagnoses are...
You're asking me about disabilities. Yeah, I was quite surprised. Chris Mays was saying, you know, the people who suffer are the parents of children with disabilities. And that's completely untrue. They get the same allotments that they've always gotten. nothing's been taken away from parents with kids with disabilities.
Yeah, in this case.
Other than the lax rules. I've had parents with disabilities come to attack me at state board meetings because I'm not letting them use, debit cards and spend it at Chick-fil-A or anything like that.
But in this one, I believe their diagnoses and, proof that they provided to the department was falsified, so these students didn't have disabilities. So I guess, how is the department assessing whether a student's diagnosis is...
You want to answer that?
So we're not making any determination on the validity of the diagnosis. What we're looking at is the authenticity of the documentation. And so again, similar to birth certificates, our staff are trained to look for anything that seems out of place or strange, and that's in fact what happened with these cases that we've turned over to the Attorney General's office.
Does one person make that decision as to whether it's legitimate, or are there different levels?
So if one of our team members identifies what they consider to be something out of place or strange, or appears to be that they've identified this as a fraudulent document, it comes up to a supervisor to review and also assess and agree whether that appears to be fraudulent or not. And then we also have an in-house investigator that we will turn this over to for further review.
And is that a new process, or has that been in place before December?
This has been our process.
Our investigator is here in the room if any of you want to talk to her.
Superintendent, just talk about the enormity of what's been taken.
Talk a little louder, please.
Yeah, talk about the enormity, the price tag, what's been taken, $600,000, and you say that, there's even worse fraud in public schools? This
Yeah.
is huge. Just comment on the size of that. That's going to be outrageous no matter where you are.
Yeah, please, do me a favor. Go to the Auditor General's website, and you'll see very large frauds committed against public schools.
But even higher than the 600,000?
Yes.
Give us some perspective on that.
I don't know what else I can say. If you look at the website of the Auditor General, you can see, I think Doug might remember. Do you remember the largest number we found
I
there?
remember what. It's on the news release in the link, though. Anybody can check it. It's ongoing.
Are you able to tell us what was purchased with that $600,000, or just some examples of what they purchased?
I'm not sure that I want to comment on exactly what was purchased, but it was primarily just educational services.
Mays described those purchases. She said she would describe them as luxury purchases. Is that accurate in your view?
Ongoing investigation.
Agree. This is ongoing, and so I wouldn't classify it in any particular way at this point.
I mean, it was a fraud, and 2 out of the 3 cases we discovered and turned over to the Attorney General. Anybody else?
And then Mays called on legislature to fully fund the cost of the ESA program, which she says is underfunded. Do you support those calls?
There's a myth that's circulated that the costs of ESA are out of control and that's a cause of the deficit. That's completely untrue. When people say that, they fail to calculate the savings of the money that would be spent in the public school if a student in ESA was in a public school. We spent $13,000 per student in the public schools. We give them $7,300 in the ESA program. And the proof of that is that for all educational expenses together, that is both public schools and ESAs, we're significantly below budget.
Anything else you want to add or say?
If you have another question, I'm delighted to answer it. If not, I'll let you all go. You probably have deadlines to meet. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, just one more. Just from the press conference, she gave John Ward, she pretty much said that he was cooperating, but she didn't say so much about how you were cooperating.
Well, John is the one that has the specific knowledge, and I instructed him to cooperate. I'm a former Attorney General. So we're going to cooperate in every detail, and John is the one that's been in touch with them because he has the detailed knowledge. I have 18 academic initiatives going. I'm heavily involved personally in every one of those 18 initiatives. Over 90% of what we do here is to help the public schools have better academic outcomes. That's what we focus on. John is in charge of the ESA program, and I instructed him to fully cooperate. And of course, he would have done it whether I instructed him to or not, because he's been 19 years an auditor in the Auditor General's office. So I didn't need to instruct him, but that's obviously my philosophy. I'm a former Attorney General. Thank you all very much.